Hey everyone, I'm Tammy Salenberger, the author of The One Inside, 30 Days to Your Authentic Self. This podcast is for anyone curious about who they are, the different parts of themselves, and for those who want to connect with their true self. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Hey everyone, welcome. On today's episode, I chat with Patricia Rich. This is Patty's second appearance on the podcast. Her first was entitled Self-Led Sexuality, and this one I just called Talking About Sex. So that is what we cover today, and apparently it involves a whole lot more than you might think. I appreciate Patty inviting us over and over again to check in with our parts as we talk, knowing that we're covering lots of sensitive topics. We also have a lot of laughter and a little bit of silliness and some distracted parts. I hope that's not triggering because I know that we're talking about something really sensitive. My favorite thing Patty says is towards the end, where she talks about the 6 S's of sexuality, which she covers in detail in the first episode. But today, she asks us to consider what is between us and feeling or experiencing those certain S words. And we can think about that too with the C words and the P words of self-energy. Like, what comes between me and feeling calm? What comes between me and feeling sensual? What comes between me and feeling playful? I loved that. And I want you to consider that as you listen. And also take pauses if you need to. Be with all the parts of you that are coming up. Pay real close attention to what you're hearing and what you're feeling in your body as you listen to this episode today. Take care of yourself. Let me tell you about Patty. Patty is a certified IFS therapist and approved consultant and an AASECT certified sex therapist and supervisor. She has developed a unique and integrative model for helping people to feel more ease, joy, and confidence in the realm of sexuality, and has originated IFS-informed concepts such as internal consent and the 6 S's of sexual self-energy. Patty has presented at the IFS Annual Conference, taught a module for the IFS Institute Online Continuity program, and led workshops internationally. She offers training and consultation to professionals and offers opportunity to behold and lead your internal sexual systems. She calls that bliss, and she talks about the bliss groups that she leads. She lives in the Philadelphia area, where she also has a private practice, and you can learn more about her at patriciarich.com. Follow her on Instagram at Patricia Rich Consulting. Just a reminder, you can pre-order the ebook for Altogether Us on Amazon. The hardcover will be available very, very soon, and there is going to be in August of this year, 2023, if you're listening in real time, August 2023 published date. So we're really excited about that. So if you want the ebook, you can order that on Amazon. Otherwise, you can wait. As soon as we get the link for the hardback cover, of course, I will let you know. I hope you're doing well. Enjoy. Today, I am super excited to have my friend Patricia Rich back on the podcast to talk about self-led sexuality. Is that what we call it?
Yes.
I was like, is that the term?
I'm calling it so many things. It keeps evolving. It's not a small topic, so it is something we could use many names to discuss.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to be here again, Tammy. It's wonderful to see you, and I so appreciate what you're doing for the community. And I appreciate as well how many opportunities came my way after being on your podcast the last time. So I feel really grateful.
Wonderful. So I'm super excited. I feel like, we just talked about this a minute ago, but I feel like it's so fun to see you, just doing things. I went to a workshop you did with Life Architect, and I was just like, oh my gosh. I mean, there was like hundreds of people there. And so it was just so fun and exciting to see you just shine and just you share your heart and your passion with so many people. So it's exciting to see.
Thank you. I'm glad you were there and you've been a part of this journey.
Yeah. It's funny. I know. I was just thinking about that. I think we met. Did we meet at a conference? I feel like we met at a conference or we met at, oh no, we met at, you probably don't remember this or know this, but I met you at the Cape Cod Institute when I did my first IFS, my first anything with IFS was at Cape Cod with Dick. And you were there. You were like a couple rows behind me. And I don't know why, but you stuck out to me. So I always kind of knew who you were. I forgot
Oh,
about that.
wow. I forgot about that too.
I love
You've
that.
come quite a ways as well in that
I
time, my
know, right?
friend.
A lot has happened since then.
For
I was actually
sure.
thinking about that the other day because my son is 12. And what I remember very clearly is he was 3. Because people kind of ask me a lot, like, how long have you been kind of in the IFS world? And I always think about that, the Cape Cod Institute being, really the beginning of the whole thing for me. And he was 3, and we had rented this Airbnb house. And he had a little tricycle, like one of those red tricycles, and it had one of those really cool houses that you could kind of, it was all open, but you could kind of do a circle. So he would go from like the kitchen to the living room and the dining room and just ride the circle. And it was when Frozen was out. And so we had the movie Frozen, God help us all, on repeat. Right. So Let It Go was on repeat and he was doing these circles. It was,
Wow.
yeah, it was a
Let
good
it
time.
go. That's a good
Yeah.
segue.
Yeah, let it go. Yeah, yeah. So we think about, IFS self-led sexuality. What do we need to let go? What happens that what do we need to let go of?
Mhm. Great question. It's a journey. It's a journey to know the answer to that question.
Mm,
Fact.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I'm guessing it really is going to depend on what parts we have. Like even imagining, people that are listening, what parts are they already noticing with the
Hmm.
topic,
Right.
with us just being able to just beginning to talk about it, just naming, saying sex, thinking about
Hmm.
sex, like what parts of them just immediately come up.
I love that you're asking that. I always encourage people to start where you are. And it can be surprising when we slow down enough just to notice all the different parts, different ages that might come up, different imagery, different assumptions. A lot of things can bubble to the surface that we might not notice are shaping our sexual perceptions, our lives. And one thing I do like to do is talk about the definition of sexuality or what I'm talking about when we're talking about sexuality.
So, Patty, before you give me the definition of sexuality, I jumped in with my Let It Go story and got excited about telling that story. I have some storytelling parts, as listeners know, but I forgot to say the reason why you're back here is because you are a contributing author to the Altogether Us book. And that's why you're here again, which is super exciting. And so, tell so I guess I want to just say that because we're going to be talking about your chapter throughout. And then so I wanted to say that before I forgot. And then why don't we start with you sent me this amazing paragraph that I thought was perfect. So why don't we start with sort of in lieu of giving me the definition, let's have you read the paragraph and then let's just break it down to what it means and we can just talk through the paragraph. How does that sound?
That sounds great. That sounds great. Yes. And I do want to just share my parts are so excited to be in this book. I have parts that have fancied themselves to be writers and have done a lot of writing privately, but this is the first published piece in a book for
Yeah.
me. So my parts are super excited.
Yeah.
And they resonated hearing you in previous podcasts give voice to some of your excited parts.
Definitely. Yes. It's very exciting. And yeah, so now you're officially a published author. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. So this is the paragraph that opens the chapter. The terrain of our sexuality is broad and extends far beyond our actual sexual experiences. It includes how we feel in our own skin, connect with others and ourselves, move energy through our bodies, and move our bodies through the world. It informs how we identify ourselves and build our families and how we express our passion, eroticism, and power. In the realm of sexuality, our physical body and its reproductive capacities meet the imprint of society and the stories of our lives, shaping the beliefs and roles we take on. A host of parts have jobs in relation to our sexuality, performing essential functions like managing what we let in and what we let out, preventing unwanted consequences, and maximizing our chances for survival, including the propagation of the species.
Wow. Okay. So, I, yeah, I want to just break that down a little bit because there's a lot in that definition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. What I guess maybe what comes up for you or what stands out for you when you read that definition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think part of there's a little story because this was the last thing I wrote. And I had been working on this chapter for quite a while, and I was doing the things you do when you're working on a chapter. And something just came to me at the end and really wanted to just say this isn't just this narrow definition of sex. I know a lot of people approach the word sex and sexuality and have just a certain idea. Often it's a certain act. It's an act. It's a performance. It's something like that.
Yeah.
And so I just realized I wanted to just say upfront and out loud that energy, our sexual energy, is something that is with us throughout our lives. Sometimes it's strong, sometimes it's muted or not experienced even sexually. I'm saying sexual energy, but maybe it's our life force energy,
Mm,
our self energy, our sense of aliveness and generativity and the impulse toward connection, toward just various aspects of aliveness. So
yeah.
that is kind of the spirit of it.
Yeah.
And then within this, there's just so much complexity to sexuality. So in here, I just felt like there was an importance in naming some of those different aspects.
I love that because I think that's what kind of came up for me is and a part of me is like I'm admitting some ignorance here, but what came up for me is the sexual act and thinking of the sexual act and how that has changed for me through the years of how this is going to sound kind of weird, but maybe understandable, kind of like how I relate to the or like my parts relate to the sexual act and how that has changed like over the years.
Mhm.
Even that is not broad enough. Like even that is
Mhm.
very like
Right.
sort of thinking about like just thinking about how my parts have related to the sexual act and how that has changed over the years. But that's just one tiny piece of it. I
Right.
mean, I have
Exactly.
all kinds of parts up around like reproductive stuff because I had
Mhm.
years of infertility.
Mhm.
So when you bring up that, I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
that's
Right.
almost a whole nother group of parts that come in
Right.
around that.
There's so many different like systems of parts, exactly. And each one could be an entire inquiry, a course, a year, a PhD, just looking at sexual identities, the many different
Right.
forms of sexual expression, sexual identities, people who identify themselves in many different ways in relation to their sexual orientation, their gender, their age, their religious values, their,
Yeah.
the point of being sexual, so there's all of that. And then I guess I want to say something because this topic can be really triggering for people.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways to feel potentially activated around this.
Yeah.
So again, we're speaking to a large varied audience here. So again, I just want to pause if that would be okay for a minute and just invite people to take a breath, just notice for yourself what's interesting about this for you, what is overwhelming, what feels alienating, what feels like a curiosity, because anything we name is going to perhaps bring up a lot of different parts. And there's a lot of shame that can come up. There's a ton of vulnerability around sexuality. And there's such a large and varied menu of shame. I've realized I've become a connoisseur of shame working in this area. There's so many different flavors and types and dynamics around the kinds of shame that people can carry. So I want to also just acknowledge now, just we haven't mentioned this yet, my own identities, and that I am humble within those. I don't pretend to be an expert on other people's lived experience. I don't know everything about this. And I just want to claim I am myself I'm in my late 50s. I am a white cisgender woman. I use she, her pronouns. I have a fairly fluid definition of my own sexuality and sexual orientation. I have parts that are in an evolution with some of that. And I am based in the United States, and I'm college, university educated. I'm upper middle class, and I just bring those lenses to my work. Right. Yeah. And I work with people from many different backgrounds, many experiences. And the beauty of bringing IFS into this topic is how, as you probably know yourself, and people who are listening are probably already have some energy around IFS. It just seems to be approachable and applicable to really diverse populations of people. Yeah. So that's something I like to bring to this, but there's so much diversity internally and also externally and in the world when we talk about this topic.
I so appreciate you saying that. And it almost, what it feels like to me as you say that is, what it feels like to me is it's all parts welcome, like all the parts of me about this topic, which are going to be different than the parts of you about the topic. And it's going to be different than for all the listeners. There's going to be different parts, and that all of those parts are welcome. And you're slowing us down, which I really appreciate. And reminding us all to be with the parts of us that come up, right? So that like I can be with the parts of me that are coming up as we're talking, and the parts that are already here right beside me as we're talking about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. The other thing that you mentioned in this paragraph is it includes how we feel in our own skin. I mean, that's, how many of us just have a hard time right there? How we feel in our own skin and the parts of us that come up around that. How we connect with others and ourselves.
Yeah.
We're going to pause on that. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then this idea of energy, like the energy moving through our bodies and how we move through our world being a body, like whatever, and then what our bodies look like and how we move through. So right there, like you have 100 parts right there.
That's absolutely true. And we exist within cultures and systems, and we may feel really at peace or aligned, as have a sense of belonging based on how we sit within the family or culture that we live in. And in that sense, may have a lot of sense of presence and entitlement, and maybe a little easier to walk around in our bodies. Or we may be living in a place that is not welcoming and embracing of how we look, how we present, what we put forth energetically in the world. And we may even be subject to oppressive external systems, legally, socially. And that's going to affect how we can walk around and embody our sexuality. And our sexuality is an emanation of our embodiment. So all those. So there's so many layers there.
Yeah. Yeah. A part of me is feeling overwhelmed, actually, as you're
Mm-hmm.
saying that. I'm like, oh, that's
Mm,
feeling overwhelming to me.
yeah. Do you want to notice that for a second?
I need to unblend from that. Um, hmm.
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 Yeah.
Yeah, I guess is thank you for that invitation. I think what's coming up for me is then how do we talk about this when it captures so much of our
Mm-hmm.
systems, and when it
Mm-hmm.
when it what it captures is the only word, of sort of entails so much of our
Mm-hmm.
systems and
Yeah.
so many of our parts,
Right.
then what's the best way to
Mm-hmm.
talk about it then?
Yeah. Well, I like to again invite people, if it's getting too big, to come back to some breath, to some feeling the floor beneath you, feeling, just where you are in place and time. Um, and I want to say more a little bit later about the groups I've been running, because it's been really profound and a way to really bring in a lot of those elements in ways that is able to be in bite-sized, pieces. So I'll perhaps say a little more about that later.
Yeah, I
It's
love
kind of
that's
like a polarity to hold both, right? Like sometimes it's just really simple, like just sitting and breathing and just feeling the body temperature, the temperature of your body and the things that make you happy and the things that give you pleasure. And, there's sort of a very present, accessible thing. And then we could really, when we really try to look at all the layers, it can get really big.
Yeah, it's a good reminder, right? Like even in just like kind of doing IFS, we just start with whoever's here,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we just start with what's here. So you just
Mm-hmm.
started like, okay, let's just check in with your body, what's
Mm-hmm.
happening in your body, and
Mm-hmm.
then sort of what parts are you noticing? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's just such a
Right.
good reminder of just sort of starting with what's
Mm-hmm.
here. And you mentioned pleasure. So I know I have a bunch of things that we're going to keep talking about, but you mentioned pleasure. So does it feel okay to read the second paragraph? And let's see what
Yes,
comes up with that.
it does. So, another quote from the chapter: sexuality offers the potential for some of life's greatest pleasures, but can also bring some of the deepest forms of pain and shame. Most of us carry at least a few sexual burdens, biases, and blind spots acquired through personal experience, as well as family and cultural legacies. As therapists, we can be challenged addressing clients' sexual issues and remaining self led. And in our personal lives, we can similarly struggle to access self in the realm of sexuality and may face the same dilemmas as many of our clients.
Beautiful, beautiful. Can we break that down a little bit? Like the
Mm-hmm.
idea that it can offer potential of some of the life's greatest pleasure. And I
Mm-hmm.
wonder how many people think that's not true, or that
Mm-hmm.
that's, have some parts up about that.
Yeah.
And then you validate, um, or just acknowledge that it also can bring some of the deepest forms of pain and shame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think if I could just focus on pleasure for a moment, we somehow, and I know we're probably speaking to people in many different parts of the world. So I want to invite people to just pause a moment here and just see how welcome is pleasure in your life, in your family, in your community. There's really a lot of difference culture to culture, in how much people maybe feel driven by managers. You always have to be productive, or maybe there's a lot of danger and threat. So survival mode is what it's all about. Um, but even in those cases, it's not doesn't boil down just one way. Sometimes cultures that have suffered the most depression have the most capacity for pleasure, because those cultures have learned that you can't survive without it. That pleasure is so important, whether that's singing and dancing and socializing and having meals together, or engaging in joyful and affectionate touch and sexual contact and having ecstatic sexual experiences, that's part of what we can do in this life, and life is short, so we need to do those things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so how much, like, I notice even when I think about pleasure, I have a part that needs to justify the pleasure to the manager parts. Like, pleasure is great, there's so much value, pleasure is good, because when we get a lot of pleasure, we get more work done. There's sometimes like a negotiation in my system about that, but it's really interesting. I don't know if that resonates for you, that, personally, that sometimes there's not a valuing of pleasure or a permission or entitlement.
Right.
And that's not even getting to whether or not you know where to look for it or how to get there.
Yeah. Right. Or being able to have like, so definitely have some parts up around that. Mine sounds sort of more like you can have it after your work is done, right? Like after you finish your homework, you can have a cookie, right? It's more sort of like, okay, after you do a million zillion things, then, but right, my system doesn't even think of that as pleasure. So it's interesting just for you to say that as like, okay, yeah, just noticing that, because pleasure feels a little bit more like opening, or like, I don't know. And so I'm sort of doing this kind of opening with my hands. It feels like pleasure. Yeah, it feels maybe a little more opening, a little bit more vulnerable, actually.
Interesting. There's an activity I do often when I'm leading a workshop, and I invite people to bring something they find pleasing in a sensory or sensual way, a fragrance, chocolate, some lotion that they, or like really soft, silky blanket or something like that. And then I'll do a guided meditation, where I invite people to really see if their parts will give them space to really be present to what they like about that. And then as they're doing that, you might imagine, and folks listening might imagine, just say you're really kind of just really savoring something yummy, just noticing how long you can stay with that. Is this something that feels like it can complete itself in a natural way? Is there kind of a shutting, like a ceiling, or parts that come in with some comments or reactions to this? And right there, that can really open some interesting trailheads for people. And often the parts are willing, like it's just an area that hasn't been visited. So that's what I find a lot, is that some of the beauty of the work I've been doing with people is just helping people visit a land inside that hasn't gotten as much attention as other things. And just sometimes those parts are really willing to give more space once they're kind of recognized and invited to. And it's like, oh my gosh.
I love that. Right. And do you think that, I mean, I know the answer to this question probably, but sort of, do you think that we all have that land inside of us that we just have closed down or exiled, right? Sort of this land of pleasure that maybe has been exiled for some reason, and we just haven't visited it in a long time.
Yeah, I think many of us do. And I'm going to again say there's probably a lot of variation depending on people's milieu that they're in. But that I like to invite people to journey into these areas. Sometimes we don't go to the areas that aren't problematic and assume that it's just, that's something I think really cool about IFS and in general, and bringing IFS to the area of sexuality, is that it doesn't only need to be based on pain and trauma. Of course, it's super valuable, and people may find traumas that can be cleared as they do this work. There often is something, but it's just a way to deepen, your experience of being alive. And you can turn that beam of consciousness, that heart energy, the compassion energy, toward what's maybe just been a bit in shadow. Like maybe it's been exiled, or maybe it just hasn't asked for anything.
Yeah, beautiful. Right, because there's this aliveness, like when you talk about the sexual energy that we all have, that there feels like there is something very alive about
Hmm.
that. And
Yeah.
then when pleasure enhance that experience of being alive.
Hmm. Yeah. I do want to acknowledge here, and this might be a good point to do it, that just as there's diversity in our external environments, there's a lot of diversity in terms of people's inner environments, and not everyone does have a lot of sexual charge or feeling. There's folks who are asexual, people who, for any of a variety of reasons, that isn't the most visceral or valued aspect. So I do want to just name that and call in those folks here too, to kind of use this as you will, because I think what we can learn in this kind of conversation can apply to lots of ways that people feel alive and impassioned.
Yeah. Yeah.
But often there is a way to um, kind of create more of a natural flow and runway from our general sense of aliveness and entitlement to pleasure and enjoyment into sexuality.
Mm.
Because I find that a lot of people struggle, let's just name that, having a vibrant sex life, and especially throughout all the different periods of your lifetime, can be challenging. Sometimes it may be easy, sometimes it may be really hard, and even in the same person on a different month or a different year.
Yeah.
So it's not always smooth and easy. And I think a
But is
challenge
it
in a lot
ever
of,
smooth and easy? I feel like it's never smooth and easy.
uh-huh,
Is it one of the things that we can say for everybody we're talking to? It's probably never been smooth and easy.
I don't think so.
No, okay, good.
Sorry.
Good. No, I like it. Good. It's nice to hear that though.
No, from, just some people, it's really just very natural, very pleasurable. It flows easily. It's not complex. Those people, those people, um, there's a range, just like we
Yeah.
can have fluency or multiple intelligences. I think people are different. And I think sometimes when people who it does flow really easily for can be pretty confounded by how hard it is for someone who is more challenged.
I don't even know how you can write a chapter about this. I mean, this definitely is a book. I mean, this is a book. This isn't just a chapter. So
Yeah,
this is definitely a
yeah.
book with there's
Mhm.
so much here.
There is a lot here. I feel like there was something you had asked me that I didn't actually
No, no,
answer.
we were talking about pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't remember what if I asked you something.
Mhm.
But I do want to shift a little
Mhm.
bit because we talked about connection.
Mhm.
You and I talked about connection before we started recording. And so I guess I wanted to talk about um connecting and how our sexuality or the act of sex either helps or keeps us from connecting.
Okay. I just remembered what I was going to
Okay,
say, which
good.
would connect here too, which is that, some people are like, well, why aren't you talking about genitals more?
Oh,
you
okay.
know, and, or genital sex. And this happens sometimes, comes up sometimes in the workshops, but this is a link to talking about pleasure more generally and embodiment and all those other things, all those sprawling things that we've just touched on. Um, when though there's some um, connection in daily life to your body and to things that feel good, it's an easier runway toward a sexual encounter.
Yeah, that's
It's
good.
not like you're totally
Yes.
cut off from yourself, from your partner, maybe whatever, super focused on something that is not putting you in touch with your sensuality, your body, your pleasure, and then all of a sudden it's Saturday night and it's, 10 o'clock and the kid's finally asleep, and now you're gonna get it on. And again, for some people, hey, great, let's go. It's right there. And for others, it's like, no, like I can't even find that. Like, what?
Right. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's like we're not kind of primed
Yeah.
to make that transition.
Yeah. You haven't started going down the runway yet.
Right. Right. You're still in the hangar.
Yeah.
So your question about connection is perhaps related to that a little bit. Can you say again what the question, how you put the question?
Um, Again, I don't remember. You can't ask me what I asked because I can't remember. But what I'm hearing you say is, and maybe this will drive something in your head, but the idea of like if there's been with my partner some other types of connection, like
Mhm,
whether it's touch or whether it's sort of love language connection, words of
mhm,
affirmation or whatever that is, or there's been some, even if it's sort of like we're working on a work project, but there's been
mhm,
some other types of connect, like energetic connection throughout the day versus you're
mhm,
doing your thing, I'm doing my thing, we're both working our butts off, and then 10 o'clock on
mhm.
Saturday, and it's like I don't really even know who you are. Like
Right.
I've been at Starbucks at the airport and you've been at
Uh-huh.
Wendy's at the airport all
Uh,
day. So
yeah.
um
Right.
yeah, so I think that's what I'm hearing.
Right. So all these different, so I mean, connection again, just a huge, many theses can be written on this subject. It probably up. So there's the connection with ourself, right? So how connected are we to our parts, to our bodies? Have we eaten food today? Have we drank water? Have we used our muscles? Just like there's all the kinds of connectedness that let us be present to ourselves. And then how do we get in connection with our partner? And if you're in a long-term relationship, we might assume we're connected because we're around each other, or even not long term. There's just assumptions like that can be made
Right.
that we're connected because of X, Y, or Z, but how much are we really in alignment? Because
Yeah.
um, when we can really, and there's so many ways to enjoy sex. So I have a part that's like, please don't sound like there's like one way to do this that's great or worthwhile or functional, or that in some way is like superior to another way, because I don't think so. There's just
Mm-hmm.
a lot of ways to access and use sexuality, or to flow with sexuality. There's a million ways.
Is that
Some
going to
are
be, is
more,
that going to be in the chapter?
yeah, more part, our parts can really use the resource of sexuality, but that can be great still. Kieran's, I can't fall asleep tonight. Solo sexuality, partnered. There's just lots of different ways that um, people and parts can engage with sexuality. But um, oh boy, where was I going with that one? I keep
Well, we're
getting
talking
like
about kids.
really big,
I
and then I
know, I
get in trouble.
know.
I'm like, wait, how do I find my way
I
back?
know, it's good. I love that you're sort of
Oh,
taking on
the
this huge thing.
right
Connection. I love this sort of
connection.
inner connection with my parts and my
Right.
body,
Oh
how
yeah,
connected
yeah,
I
yeah.
am.
So if you want to have an intimate, connected sexual experience, that was all the disclaimers about that. That's not the only kind. Say you're going for that
There's a
intimate
part of me that's like, but
connection
I want a
thing.
list of all the other different kinds because I
Right,
don't know that I know what they
right,
are, but I want to know.
right. People have done that. There's posters of like
Oh, good. I
like
want a poster.
150 reasons to have an orgasm today, or to have sex. Um,
There's
um,
posters. My
yeah,
good girl part is like, what? Poster? I want a poster.
yeah. So
Sorry.
yeah, so to feel connected with a partner, or with partners, there's a way of bringing ourselves forward. And sometimes people don't even understand the role that sexuality can play in a relationship. And I actually spend time with people often just talking about, like, why have sex in your relationship? People might be satisfying themselves privately and not bringing it to their partners, or just not having sex at all and just thinking it doesn't matter. And there's just a way that the warmth I sometimes call it like the hearth in your home, like, that when you bring warmth
Mm.
into the center of your home, this is assuming there's a home. um, but when you can
Or a
really,
loose definition of home.
a
Yeah.
loose
Yeah.
definition of home. So when you really join with a partner with a lot of warmth and intimacy, and you create together almost like a circle of warmth around you. And, sometimes I have people who are really child focused and they don't have any energy or time for their partner because they're so consumed with the child, having to have every activity, every opportunity. They want to do the best thing for their child. And I'm like, that's great, but don't undervalue how healthy it is for your child to have a warm hearth in their home.
Beautiful.
A sense of warm connection.
Yeah.
If they're living in a home, with both of their parents, or even a happy parent, who is taking the time to take care of themselves and love themselves in a warm and spacious way.
Yeah.
That there's a value to that.
Yeah.
And then the other things that you do, there's more bounce to it. Do you know what I mean? Like it sort of fills up something. And then the things that might be annoying, maybe they're still annoying, but they're not as annoying.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'm like, yes. I get this 100%. Yeah.
So sometimes there's updating, like through the IFS lens, we just try to find the parts that have like, hey, what are the beliefs in your system about this? Which parts are ready, which parts aren't, which parts, there's just, I like to help people to do something that I call behold and lead your internal sexual system, which is the acronym is BLISS. So I've been running BLISS groups, and it's been really amazing to take people through this 6 to 8 week flow through each of the 6 S's, which I know I spoke of in the last podcast, but if I will quickly name here, that I've added to the qualities of self energy that have acronyms. So Dick Schwartz, of course, has identified the 8 C words, which your listeners, I would think, are probably familiar with, words like calm and compassionate and connected, creative, etc. There's P words. Others have come up with acronyms or whatever those are. And it came to me as I was doing some writing about this that the qualities of self energy that show up in relation to sexuality, to me, these words came, which are safe, sensual, spacious, sensitive, steamy, and satisfied. And those words have evolved to be useful in many different ways. But I've used them to frame the curriculum for these groups. And so we kind of focus on one of the S's in each segment. And I think of these as positive trailheads. Like often we're looking at pain points as a point of focus, that if we're trying to maybe focus on this experience, whether you have it or not, but notice sort of maybe what's between me and this S.
I love that. That's perfect. Yes.
And then that opens up then like the different parts that might need some attention.
Yeah.
Maybe there's burdens that, things that need to heal. Maybe there's some updating or educating. That's right. I think I was getting to this, is this idea that we can update our parts about the role of sexuality. Maybe we were raised to believe that sex was only for reproduction, or was only for straight people, or was only for young people, or only for skinny people, or whatever. And we may have parts that really believe that. And when they look in the mirror and we're not that, they're like, there's no place for this for you. And so when we're able to slowly perhaps take in other understandings of what it is, why it matters, how it helps us not be depressed and disconnected and cut off, all the different values that can have, sometimes we can update the system.
Yeah. That's great. That's really great, Patty. So I love that so much. I just wrote it down. The idea of like looking at what's between me and this S word, or you can do it with the C words or the P words too. And using that as a trailhead instead of the pain points. I think that's really great, especially, I think probably for any topic, but my guess is if you're still listening to this podcast, if you came this far, then you have all kinds of parts up, right? My guess is, even though Patty, you've done a great job of, a couple of times kind of inviting us just to really check into ourselves and our systems as we've listened. That, there are probably lots of parts up. And so what
Mhm.
if you began, I mean, you could notice those parts and unblend from those parts, of course, but really take this invitation of like, what's between me, and pick one of the S words that sort
Mhm.
of stands
Mhm.
out to you, and sort of
Right.
what's between me and this S word. I love that.
Mhm. Yeah. And my hope is that the chapter is less overwhelming than me trying to summarize a chapter in a short conversation.
I am
That
sure
it's
that it will
laid
be.
out in a
Right.
fair, hopefully not too overwhelming way. And there's resources at the end of the chapter for follow up with me, with others, other resources. So I hope that folks can pace themselves.
Well, and there's something very different about when you are writing or when someone is reading, and the pace of that and the organization of that material that
Mhm.
just has a different feel than you and I,
Mhm.
casually chatting about this
Mhm.
really big topic and trying to do
Right.
it in a time way. And then you and I, being friends and wanting to
Mhm.
chat anyways. So there's all kinds of things
Right,
happening.
lots going on.
Yeah, yeah.
Lots going on.
Is there anything else you want to say about these bliss groups or other groups that you've been
Mm.
running that you want to tell people about?
Yeah, it's been amazing to it's funny, if you haven't figured this out about me, I have some parts that get very big, have really get deep into the concepts and just the interconnections of all these different things. And the groups have really brought it down to earth. um, how to help people just move experientially through in a very safe and supportive container.
Mm,
Just how to start to approach their own sexual systems.
mm,
Just noticing protectors, noticing the body, and just that moving through it as a group, I think, is so powerful. And at first I was trying to really do a lot of fancy IFS stuff, when I was doing demos with people, and sometimes that was great. But I realized after a while that just naming, having sexual parts, you know, in a self-led community, just being able to speak and speak for parts is profoundly healing and transformational for people, because we
mm.
don't tend to have those kinds of spaces.
Yeah,
Maybe with a partner, maybe we're kind of jokey about it, or
right.
but to really bring the self energy and the kind of community we can develop in a self-led, IFS grounded space, just in itself was so powerful for people. I'm a little bit proud of this, but did ask people to do a survey at the end. So the last cohort, I had 16 people go through 2 different groups, and it was over the course of 8 weeks, 20 hours. And at the end, I believe it was 90% said they had found and befriended at least one new part in their sexual system. And 80% said that of the respondents said that they had seen improvements in their own sexual experiences, alone or with partners.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Um, how about we end? Well, we don't have to totally end here, but what if you tell us, is there anything that has changed or developed since the last time we met? Anything that you haven't told us
Mm.
already?
Mhm.
Yeah, that has changed or developed since then, besides these
Mm.
amazing groups that you're running.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think bringing uh, you just said besides the thing that I think I want to say.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
that's okay.
Like, besides that, don't talk about
Besides that, more broadly, I think since the last time that I was on this, it has really made that migration from being a bit more at the conceptual level to developing embodied practices and being able to work with people more in groups and workshop settings. And I have a sneak preview. I don't know, can't release all the details yet, but I'm going to be leading a retreat in a very exciting international location.
Does it have the initial CR?
It does not.
Oh, it doesn't. Okay.
Although there might be one of those too.
Okay. Yeah, there's lots of those in CR. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's super exciting, Patty. So how can people keep up with you and find out about bliss groups and what you're doing and possible retreats and exotic sexy locations?
And also coaching. I've been doing consultation and coaching, and I do have a local psychotherapy practice in the Philadelphia area, but my primary focus now is more of the training and workshops. You can visit my website, www.patriciarich.com. And I have an Instagram, Patricia Rich Consulting, and both of those will give you access to my free 6 S's of Sexual Self-Energy graphic.
Ooh.
And if you sign up for that, you'll automatically be on my mailing list. And that's another way to find out about upcoming events.
Perfect. I know I didn't ask you where you were in the world, but you did tell us that you're in Philadelphia or outside of Philadelphia. So let's end on the question that I love to ask everybody. If you weren't doing what you're doing and you had to do something else, you had to do something different, what would you do instead?
I would buy an overnight camp. It had cabins and bunks and swimming pool and all that. And I would invite all my friends and people that I think are interesting to stay there and make campfires at night and have fun and play.
That sounds great. I love that. I love that. And am I invited? Am
Absolutely.
I someone interesting and fun? Hey, good.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That sounds really fun. Well, thank you for this, Patty. And I'm looking forward to reading your chapter, and I appreciate you being on.
Thank you so much, Tammy. It was a pleasure, as always.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, like, all the things. My book is available at your favorite independent bookstore or all the places books are available. You can also visit my website, tammysallenberger.com, where you can download a free meditation on getting to know your should parts. You know, there's parts of you who remind you of what you should be doing. They sound a bit critical at times. Yes, we all have them. You can follow me at IFS Tammy on Instagram and Twitter and the One Inside Facebook page. I'm so grateful for Jack Reardon, who created the new music. Jack is a graduate of Derek Scott's IFS Stepping Stone program. Thanks, Jack, for getting me. And to you, thanks for listening.